Hey folks, John Smale here again. Smale's Pace is the podcast, and I'm happy to be back today. I'm on a little time travel. This is something you might want to try yourself. Uh, when I say try yourself, what I've done here today, I've gone to Google Earth, and I found a bunch of places I used to live at in London, Ontario, during my days there. I first, when I came to London, I lived in residence the first year at Westminster College at Western Campus, and then the second year, my buddies and I moved to University Village, and I met a lot of people that I know to this day that lived in that development, I guess, in Kipps Lane. It was a bunch of townhouses all joined in a square around a central clubhouse, etc. Then, when I went on my own and my brothers moved to London, we had a wonderful little house, and I thought it was gone because I tried to find it before when I was driving around, and I thought, oh my God, they've torn it all down and they've rerouted the river. But I found it on Google Earth. It's 95 Walnut Crescent. And that's that little white house up in the corner there. And it's like going back to your grade school and saying, my God, was it ever, I was so big to me then, and it's so tiny now. And that was the house of many, many great, wonderful memories. And my brother Bob and his girlfriend Evelyn, and my brother Jim and his girlfriend Nancy, and myself with Ruth lived in that house, and it seemed so big, and it had a great yard, and we had a dog, and it was a fantastic place to live. Then when I after my brothers left London and moved to British Columbia, I rented an apartment there on Princess Avenue, the one right beside that, and on the second floor. And I'm thinking that the left half was mine, and the right half was Jeanette Gritani's. She had an apartment in the same house as me, and Jeanette worked at Smale's Pace, and we'd known each other from university, and seems like we've known each other for so long, and her family. And Jeanette was a wonderful cook, and I like to cook too. And I don't know where the heck we must have got all our cooking instruments and pots and pans, etc., from thrift stores, which were everywhere in those days. And so that was a great apartment. Many, many musicians stayed in that apartment on Princess Avenue. And it was around the corner from Stan Rogers' house and from Nancy Dolan's house. And so many people that lived in that old London North neighborhood that were part of our crowd that we hung out with. And I've said in other episodes how much we walked back in those days. We walked everywhere because it was possible to walk. We could have had bicycles. In fact, I did have a bicycle at one time, and maybe I had one or two. I used to buy them at the police auctions because things got stolen, things got lost, etc. Then I moved to the next place there, which is Queen's Avenue. That was just a magical, magical apartment. And next to Smale's Pace was a clothing store called Doug Powers Clothing, and it was quite an upscale clothing store. And there was a fellow that worked in there. His name was Thomas, and I was living in. Well, I've got a little order mixed up here, I suppose, because before I did that, I lived at Dundas and Clarence, which is in the upper right-hand corner of the screen there. It didn't look anything like that, folks. That's all torn down and rebuilt as some kind of a semi-modern development. At that corner where it says Variety, that was the famous Sam the Record Man store. It used to be an old Rexall drugstore. It got converted to a Sam the Record Man, and beside that was another retail. They were all retail stores of sort of that three-story nature along there. And I had a terrific loft up there that was given to me by Michael Bidner, an artist who lived there for years. And Michael decided he wanted to move to Rockwood, Ontario. And he said, do you want my loft? And I said, yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And it was huge, and it had a huge back flat roof, and it had a metal fire escape that went down to the parking lot and behind. And you walked across the street and you're at Smales Pace. Now, Smales Pace is shown there at the bottom underneath the Smales Pace logo. It's difficult to see there. It's now a cafe restaurant called Nooners with the green awning there that you can see. And where it says shawarma, oh my God, that was Doug Power's clothing store, and it was so elegant and so, really, really a lovely store. And then the alleyway just to the right of that store was where we parked out back. And to the left there was a chiropractor and whatever. It was, so central and so downtown. And I see they've built quite a glassy tower in behind there. That's probably on Queens Avenue. Now back to Queens Avenue again. Well, I guess after Dundas and Clarence, where I had the loft there, I moved to Richmond Street to a very illegal loft that you had to get to it almost after hours, and it was kind of a tough place to live. You're coming and going and trying to cheat your way around, as it were. And neither of those places had hot showers or tubs or anything like that. So I was a member of the YMCA, which was over at Dundas and Wellington, and that's where I had to go shower and clean up and shave, etc. So those are my two loft experiences, Dundas and Clarence and Richmond Street. And then I heard from this Thomas guy that he was leaving town, and he said, would you be interested in renting my apartment on Queens Avenue? And I said, well, I'd love to see it. And I went over there. It was the most magical, wonderful place. A 2-story apartment, 2nd and 3rd floor. And he'd done a terrific job renovating it, and the colors were great. Everything was wonderful about it. It had a wood-burning fireplace. It had a rooftop terrace. But the best part of it was that I had to meet the approval of the landlady. He said, that's the condition. He says, if Peggy likes you, but you gotta apply to Peggy and pass her test. Now, Peggy Glass was her name, and she was a grand old dame, and just became just a dear friend of mine. But she says, well, come on in, John, and let's talk about who we are and all that stuff. She says, I was born and raised in London, and she was part of the Labatt clan somehow. She was related, but she was also first cousins with Hume Cronin, the very, very famous Broadway and Hollywood actor who married Jessica Tandy. And they were thick as thieves and lived together in New York City when Peggy moved to New York. And of course, Peggy went to be an actress also. But she says, oh, John, she says, I was about as good of an actress as I was handling a broom. So she says, I went to secretarial college. But that aside, do you want a drink? And I said, well, sure, that'd be nice. And so we had a couple gin and tonics, and then we had a couple more gin and tonics. And then she says, I rather like you. And I would be happy if you moved upstairs. And I said, Peggy, I would be very happy for you to be my landlady, and I promise never let you down. So we became very wonderful friends, and I miss our evenings together, because part of the condition was that I'd have to spend an evening a week with her having drinks and talking about if we won $1 million, what would we do with it back when the lotteries first started. That's a bit of my background there. And then the Anderson family, Billy Anderson and Betty Anderson, took that apartment over when I left and got together with my wife, Joanne Smale. And Joanne had an apartment over in London South, which I wasn't all that familiar with, but that's a story for another time. And in these days of moving around, and I'm sure you did too, I'm sure many of you moved around to different places. One of the places after I sold Smales Pace, which is another story, which I'll be getting to, but I did stick a picture in here of the Ben Miller Inn. Perhaps that should have been on another podcast, but it's there now. And everything's a one-take Johnny for me. So there's the Ben Miller Inn. After I sold Smales Pace, I went up to work on this design job of getting the mill at Ben Miller and the spa and the barn and the theater together. And I worked for my employer, the owner of it, was Peter Ivy of the famous Ivy family of London, Ontario. So these are little snapshots of where I lived, and then Joanne and I lived on Dufferin Street also. There's a house there. We had the bottom back floor of it, and it was a terrific place too. So this is something I'd recommend to you guys to maybe give it a shot. Now, Google Earth also has this sliding scale. You can go back about 5 to 10 years and look at your house 5 or 10 years ago too. So it's a wonderful tool to have, and it's been a great walk down memory lane for me. And I thought, well, maybe you might be interested about where I lived. I don't know why you'd be interested. Maybe I was interested. I thought maybe you might find it interesting. Who knows? Because London was a terrific city, and we enjoy the variety of places to live. And that's it, my friends, for today. The places I've lived in London. Take care now. Bye-bye.